about this, or is this picking it up anyways? Sounds pretty good here. We're okay. Ladies in the back, you good? Otherwise, I'm going to trip over this thing before we're done. Good afternoon. I'm Bob Lindbergh from Gallagher Benefit Services. We are the Board of Ed's benefit health consultant and advisor. My office is in Windsor, Connecticut, and I live in East Granby. And we've been working with the Board of Ed, the town now, for close to 5 years.
Is it Mike? Mike?
Yeah,
Mike.
hard to hear back here.
Do I have to talk right into this?
Of
course it'll be on.
There, thank you.
Thank you.
Is that better?
See.
The purpose of this afternoon session, just so we're clear, we're here to provide you with an overview of the high deductible health plan and health savings account. These meetings, the one last week, this week, and next week, are meant to be overview presentations, and then subsequent to this, we're going to have what I call the open enrollment meetings, which are the sessions that get into a lot more detail. And at those meetings, we'll have premium costs and plan cost comparisons and what if, and a lot of different resources to go through. But I just want to make sure that we level set the expectations here. That today's session is really meant to provide you with a working overview of what the program is and the opportunity to start to formulate some of the questions you want to make sure you get answered either between now and the open enrollments or at the actual open enrollment meetings. And so up in front, we have 4 handouts. One of them is the PowerPoint, which I'll use today for the presentation. And the other 3 pieces are really meant to be takeaways. We're not going to go over them in any detail today. One of them includes a list of qualified medical expenses from Anthem Blue Cross, along with some links to websites that get into that in much more detail. And during the course of this presentation, we'll talk about why it's important to understand what qualified medical expense is. Another of the handouts is also from Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield. It's an FAQ packet. It's about 7 pages long. And it gets into a lot of good questions that people will typically ask about how the program might affect them. And I would encourage you to read that after the meeting prior to the open enrollment sessions. The third piece is something on Gallagher paper that was from us. And what we did is we've gotten some initial questions already from the membership, very specific things, and we started to build a running list out. So that 2-sided piece, or if it's stapled, it's 2 pieces of paper. It includes some very specific questions we've gotten so far. We're going to continue to add to that through each of the sessions. And then at the open enrollment meetings, things that you'll get in addition to will be a fact sheet summary from Anthem Blue Cross as to how the program actually works. We'll actually have premium and cost-sharing information along with an Excel worksheet that will allow you to do personal cost comparisons as to how you think the plans will work. There'll be an expanded FAQ specific to South Windsor that we put together that builds on the Anthem piece, which is a little general, and a lot more information like that. So the goal today is to go over what a high deductible health plan is, what a health savings account is, how it's similar to some of the things you currently have in your Century Preferred PPO plan, how it's different, and the types of things you want to be thinking about between now and the open enrollment meetings, which are going to be where you start thinking about actually making a decision for July 1, 2016. So let's see if this is still... Here we go. I don't usually use technology, so please bear with me. The agenda for today, we're going to talk about the high deductible health plan and the health savings account. We tried to remove all the buzzwords and most of the acronyms from this, and 1 or 2 may slip in. But the 2 things that are important as we go through this, the HDHP, or the high deductible health plan, is your insurance benefit. The health savings account, or HSA, is a financial tool, and we're going to talk about how they work together in this program and how they are actually separate things, and it's important to understand that. We're going to talk at some part about the specifics of the Anthem Blue Cross program, which is also referred to as the Luminos plan. You'll see that in several different spots. Luminos is Anthem's brand name for this high deductible health plan. A few years back, they bought a company by the name of Luminos, and it just carried over. So when you see Luminos, it's an Anthem product, it's a brand name, and this information today is going to include some of that. The information the open enrollment meetings will get into a lot more detail. Okay. For today, one of the key things to walk away from this meeting with is that your high deductible HSA program has 2 pieces. People talk about HSA plans as if they're a single thing, but they're not. The 2 pieces are the high deductible health plan, which is the actual insurance benefit, and then the HSA, or the health savings account, is a financial tool that is made available to you when you enroll in the high deductible plan. But the HSA is a separate thing. It's basically a checking account with your name on it. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. What I wanted to do is emphasize that the high deductible health plan itself is built on the same platform or chassis as the Century Preferred PPO program. And so it has the same network of participating providers, same network of participating facilities, same formulary as far as prescriptions are concerned. So it's built on identical platform. And so as you think about the two plan choices, you don't need to worry about it. My doctor's in the Century Preferred plan, is he or she also in the high deductible plan? It's the same network. You don't need to worry if the prescriptions are treated differently because a generic, a preferred brand, and a non-preferred brand, the list is the same for both. At the same time, the dental program, it stands on its own as a policy, so the dental provisions are not affected by any of the things we're going to talk about today. Whether you're enrolled in the Century Preferred PPO or the high deductible plan, your dental structure is the same. Some of the things about the HSA are going to be different because you can use that with the dental program, but it does not change the underlying terms of the dental plan. And one of the key things to know right up front, because it affects a lot of things we're going to talk about today, the HSA, that bank account, that's owned by you. When you enroll in the high deductible plan and you open up your HSA, the HSA belongs to you. It is a checking account with your name on it. It will say HSA account, but any money that's deposited to that account from whatever source belongs to you, and it's always yours until you choose to use it. Yeah, that's a good thing. On page 3, the high deductible plan will not against branding. It is a PPO program. It has in-network and out-of-network coverage levels. It's important with this program that wherever you can, you stay in-network and use a participating provider because you maximize the value of the plan to yourself and your dependents. As I said earlier, it's the same network. So if you're currently seeing a doctor and they're considered to be a participating provider, it's the same thing with the high deductible platform. It doesn't change that. If you're taking a medication today and it's a tier 2 brand, it's still a tier 2 brand under the high deductible plan. Those things stay the same. One of the things to know, though, is on the medical side, there aren't going to be any more co-pays associated with medical services. You're either going to be in the deductible or you're going to be having the plan pay your covered expenses at 100% as long as you stay in network. So there are no per-service co-pays affiliated with medical services anymore under the program. On the prescription side, while you're reaching your deductible level, scripts are treated just like a medical expense. They're going to be counted against the deductible level until you have enough expenses to reach, some people say accumulate. Until you fill the deductible, scripts and medical services get treated the same. Once you've reached your deductible for the year, though, prescriptions from that point forward will be paid at 100% less the appropriate copay. So you still have co-pays for prescriptions, but only after you've reached your deductible. The deductible is a plan year cost share. We'll spend more time on it in a minute. But basically, it runs from July 1 through June 30, and then it resets. So at the end of the first plan year, it starts again. The second plan year is $2,000 if you're enrolled as an individual, $4,000 if you're enrolled for family coverage. Preventive care services are always paid at 100% by the plan if you're in network. So they do not count against your deductible, and you do not have any out-of-pocket expenses. At the open enrollment sessions, we'll get into a lot more detail about the preventive care list. The way to think about them in the meantime, especially if you start to think about what kinds of services do I get under the program. A preventive service is something that is scheduled for you either because of your age or a preset frequency. So annual well exams, annual pediatric well exams, your first baseline mammography, your first baseline colonoscopy. Those things are scheduled for you because you are of a certain age or reached a certain point in the cycle. For the most part, those would be considered as preventive care expenses, and they're paid at 100% by the plan, not charged against your deductible. On the other hand, if you have, for example, a known condition, then additional related tests or reviews or visits are scheduled for you because of that, those are considered treatment or diagnostic, and they're charged like a regular expense. The two examples I use most often, I take cholesterol medication, and so I get 2 blood draws a year to make sure that my levels are all good and my liver's okay, all The one that's linked to my well exam generally doesn't show up anywhere else. It's considered part of the preventive, and so it's paid by the plan. The mid-year one, though, where it's just the blood draw to do the check, I've got a condition. They're checking on me. It's meant to prevent future problems, but it's not a preventive service. The other example I use is my wife is a cancer survivor. She has to get her mammograms done more frequently than the standard schedule. When she's on schedule, they're preventive. When she's in between because she's got a known condition, those are treatment or diagnostic, and they will be charged against the deductible. At the open enrollment sessions, we get into that a lot more. In the interim, if you've got questions or you want to do a little research, the anthem.com website does have a section on preventive care services. And this is a good point to ask a question. Does anybody here currently have a My Anthem account on anthem.com? Has anybody gone in and created their own account? Good. I would encourage you, the rest of you, to do that, even if you choose not to use the high deductible plan at some point. The advantage of that website from a personal use perspective is you can go in and see exactly what kind of services you and or your family members have had for the past 24 to 36 months. And it tells you what the actual costs of those services were. Not necessarily what you paid as a copay, but what the actual cost of the service was. So that as you start to think about what life would be like under a high deductible plan where you've got the deductible before you start to get reimbursed for services, it can tell you exactly what those things might cost and how they might get used. There's also a great tool there that allows you to think about things that might be happening in the near future for you that you haven't had before, and you can do cost analysis and cost review as well as quality review. For example, at some point here I have to have knee surgery and my orthopedic surgeon retired, so I'm going to have to go find a new surgeon. I always start by asking my brother because he's had 6 surgeries. But beyond that, the ability to go into the website and look at a provider and what the quality review and the cost review and things like that are is a very helpful tool. So whether you are thinking of staying in the Centric Preferred Plan or going to the high deductible plan, I encourage you to create your own account on anthem.com. One thing to be aware of is for your spouse, if you have one, and for children over the ages of 18, due to privacy rules, you cannot actually open an account for them because they have to have their own password, and which was a bit of an eye-opener for me. I've got my son at 4 years. My son's on the insurance program, and I had to get a release. And then they went to college, I couldn't get their grades without a release. I'm paying tuition, I'm paying for the premiums, and I still can't get the information. Just be forewarned, if you've got an 18-year-old, they have to give you permission, so be aware in advance. But it's great information to have, and it's a very helpful tool. Again, preventive care at 1%. The deductibles, it's $2,000 for the year if you enroll as an individual, and it's $4,000 if you enroll as a family. And a family is anybody that's not an individual. One dependent turns you into family classification under the IRS guidelines. And I just want to emphasize that those are IRS guidelines. It's not a Gallagher thing or an Anthem thing. It's the way the IRS put the programs together. So you're either enrolled as an individual or you're enrolled for family coverage. It's a 2-tier plan design. It's a $2,000 12-month deductible if you are single, and it's a $4,000 plan year deductible if you're enrolled as a family. And by plan year, I mean July 1 through June 30. Your costs, as you incur them under the program, are accumulated by Anthem Blue Cross. They track it on their claim system. When you've reached your deductible for the year, for medical services, as long as you're in network, the plan will pay 100% for the balance of the year. For prescriptions, you'll pay, excuse me, the plan will pay 100% less the appropriate copay. We'll get to that in just a minute. Under the terms of your collective bargaining agreement, the first year, the board's going to make a deposit of 50% of the deductible value. That's $1,000 if you're enrolled as an individual, and $2,000 if you're enrolled as a family. In our Q&A page, it gets into a little detail. In the first year, that entire amount is going to be deposited in July. In years 2 and 3 of the bargaining agreement, it's split in equal installments between September and February. The employee, you, may also make deposits into your HSA if you want. You are under no obligation to do so. You do. Yes, ma'am?
Can you repeat what you said? So the board pays deposit for the first year, and what was the rest of it?
In the second and the third year, it'll be 50% of the total in 2 equal installments in September and February.
So it's 25%.
It's in one of the handouts if you need the confirmation.
Right, thanks.
It's also in your bargaining agreement, so if I can stay in your agreement, dictates. I'm pretty sure I got that tonight, though.
Excuse me.
It's, again,
Is it the total of the individual 2,000 or family 2,000?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay, you said about on 2016-17, the full amount will be put in there on July 2016. What is that full amount?
The $1,000.
Which is,
1,000 for single, 2,000 for families, to be deposited in July 2016.
okay, all right.
I have a question.
Yes?
I'm pregnant, so when I have the baby, it'll probably go.
Hey,
Oh, by the way.
congratulations, by the way.
If this is specific, that has to be with the other. I'm sorry.
Well, it's about like when the board's gonna fund. So
I'm sorry?
it's when the board funds it. So I'm due in August. So you said the board's funding in July, but what if I go from an individual to a family a month later?
I don't have specific guidance
Okay.
from the board yet on that, but it is a question I know is already been posed.
Okay,
We're
sounds
working.
good.
I'm sorry, I thought you were going to ask a different question. I'm not allowed to answer certain things in public audience. Excuse me. With respect to your ability to make deposits to the program during the year, you can do that. You have no obligation to make a deposit to the HSA. Any money that the board puts in on your behalf is not taxed at the time it's deposited. And if you put money in yourself, you can do that on a pre-tax basis, meaning it's not taxed when it goes in. And as long as it comes out with qualified medical expenses, it will not be subject to tax in the future either. So if you use the money in your HSA for qualified medical expenses, as the plan is designed, you will never pay tax on the money that flows through your HSA account. And that's an important consideration because there's a great deal of financial and tax leverage you can create by using the HSA for these funds. Excuse me. Because if you're averaging 20 to 30%, somewhere in the 20 to 30% range is typically where most people fall between federal, state, and FICA. It means putting $1,000 in really only costs you $750 or even $700. And so there's a lot of value to using the program and using it appropriately. We're going to talk more about the qualified expenses idea today. We get into a lot of detail around that during the open enrollment sessions. The annual limits, yes, sir.
If my spouse has the health benefits card, and we use that towards health expenses when this starts, you will automatically keep track of that?
I'm sorry, say again?
So I have a health benefits card.
Is that the HSA card? Or
No, it's a separate one. My wife's in another district. It's just she has the money out, and I pay expenses with that. Will Anthem keep track of that towards my deductible?
There's two parts to the question. One is how does Anthem keep track of information, and the other is what can I use in conjunction with this program? There's a little bit more information further back, but the short answer is any claim that you or a provider submit to Anthem, they'll maintain in their claim system. And so it has to be something that gets to Anthem. If you're in-network, you use a participating provider for it, the provider will get the appropriate information to Anthem, whether you're in your deductible or not. If you use a non-participating provider, you need to know whether the provider is going to submit for you or not. That's the same as under your current program. The Centric Preferred PPO provides for non-network care and reimbursement, but it's between you and the provider to work out how that's going to be, because the provider has no obligation because they're not contracted with Anthem. The second part was around an external benefit or some other prepaid card or a flex card from spouse's program. As an employee, you may enroll in the high deductible plan and participate in the HSA as long as you are not also enrolled in a plan that is not a qualified high deductible plan. So if you are enrolled as a dependent in your spouse's HMO program, or you are enrolled as a dependent in your spouse's flexible spending program, or something like that, you need to get out from underneath that if you want to put money into the HSA. Because the government's rules are that you may not participate in the HSA if you're also covered under a non-high deductible health plan. The most common scenarios are Medicare Part A and TRICARE, but we do see people that are jointly covered under a spouse's program. So you need to understand that come July 1st, if you want to be participating in the HSA, the health savings account, you must be enrolled in this high deductible plan and not covered under something that's not considered qualified by the IRS. In open enrollment, we have more examples and we'll get into more detail around that. But for planning purposes, it's important to understand that if you have coverage through your spouse and it's not a high deductible plan, you may have a problem, if you're the employee here, you may have a problem participating in the HSA. Anybody can enroll in a high deductible plan. It doesn't matter what you've got for other coverage elsewhere, because the high deductible plan is your insurance benefit, and that's not restricted. What's restricted by the IRS is the ability to make deposits to the HSA if you're covered under a non-qualified plan. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but I'm not exactly sure what the hell.
It's a flexible spending card. It's not tied to their plan. We're not part of their plan whatsoever. That's what
I would need to know more about the program. I don't want to speculate about what it is actually, but if you are covered under an insurance benefit and flexible spending accounts are considered an insurance benefit by the IRS, then you cannot participate in the HSA unless it's only a high deductible type of benefit. The dollar amounts here shown as deposit maximums. Those are the maximum amount that the IRS allows you to contribute to your HSA in a given tax year. It is $3,350 in 2016 for somebody enrolled as a single, and it is $6,750 for family members. Everything else about this program is 2 times. I have no idea why that is not exactly 2 times, but it's the IRS guidelines, and that's what we work with. It's important to understand that these are annual deposit limits. They're indexed annually, and so each year we get a new value for what's the maximum you can put in. These are limits on an annual current deposit. The IRS doesn't want people to over-contribute or get too big of a tax break from this. It is not a limit on how much money you can actually maintain in your health savings account. Unlike a flexible spending account, there is no use it or lose it feature to the health savings account. Money that you put in stays there until you decide to use it. So if I take a deposit from the board this year and I choose not to spend it until 2021, that's fine. The money stays there. It earns interest. It's a checking account interest rate, so it's pretty de minimis, but it does earn interest. And in the future, if interest rates come back, interest is not subject to tax. As long as you take your earnings on your account out for qualified medical expenses, they also will not be subject to tax. If you're 55 or older, you can make an annual catch-up contribution of an additional $1,000 to the account. Common question is, why would I put in more than what the board's putting in? For one reason, your deductible is higher than what the board's contributing, because the board's only contributing half the deductible. So some people deposit money into their account to be ready for the other half. Secondly, because you can put in more than the deductible based on these IRS limits, it also allows you to plan for future service expenses that you know you might have. All 4 of my sons went through orthodontic coverage, and it was not inexpensive. And it was also at a time where all I had was a flexible spending account available to me, which meant you could put in what the limits were that year, but they had to come right back out. You couldn't build up in advance. With a health savings account, dental expenses are qualified medical expenses. So you can set money aside in advance to be used against future expenses. Same is true with vision. Most vision expenses are considered to be qualified medical expenses. Things that are covered by your health plan but not fully reimbursed, either because you're in your deductible or you might have used up your maximum frequency or whatever, those are qualified medical expenses. So the maximum allows you to set dollars aside potentially in advance for things that you think are going to happen. And one of the positives is that if it doesn't happen this year but happens next year, is you'll lose your money in December because there's no use in losing feature to the HSA. The HSA account belongs to you and the money in the account stays available to you until you choose to use it. Again, the board's... Yes, sir.
When, in like 15, 20 years from now, the board decides to completely change this again, and, you know, I'm pretty healthy, I'm young at this point, I don't need stuff till like 20 years out, will I still have access to this in 20 years?
The account belongs to you. You always have access to the account. You could take the board's money this year, retire next year, the money belongs to you. You can use it against expenses under your retirement program, if you're covered by Medicare, things that Medicare doesn't reimburse, dental expenses still. You do not have to be actively employed by the board to use the money in the HSA. You need to be in the high deductible plan to make new contributions to your HSA, but you do not even need to be enrolled in the high deductible plan to use the money in the HSA. Once the money is in the HSA, actually, you can use it for any qualified tax dependent that belongs to you. I'll volunteer mine. They don't go very far. And that's important because it does mean, and this is kind of over a long conversation, but it does give you flexibility. I've been covered under this type of program for almost 7 years now. And in the first year that we did participate, I signed up as an individual in the high deductible plan. My wife stayed with the 4 boys in the HMO plan. We were an early adopter, but I was a little shaky on all the details back then. And what I was able to do is contribute to my HSA based on a single person's limitations because I was enrolled as an individual. But once the money was in the HSA account, I could use it to pay the HMO co-pays for my wife and my 4 sons under their plan because they were all qualified tax dependents. So the person or people you use the funds for don't actually have to be enrolled in the high deductible plan. You need to be enrolled in the high deductible plan. You make your contributions, and after that, you can use it for any family member that's a qualified tax dependent, even if they're not enrolled in the high deductible. If in the future you decide you want to do this anymore, you go back to the Century Preferred, the money in the high deductible plan, the money in the HSA is still available to you. You can use it against Century Preferred co-pays, against the dental expenses, against the vision expenses. You are not required to be in the benefit to use the money. You have to be enrolled in the high deductible plan to put new money in or to accept the board's contribution. The question that normally falls when we get 20 years out, it's 20 years from now and I die, what happens to the money? Well, if you haven't used it all by then, it will get left to your surviving spouse first, and if you don't have a surviving spouse, it will go to your estate. So you never actually lose control of the money. You might get taxed somewhere in that transaction. But the money is there until you choose to use it. And so you can build up a balance and use it in the future. You can use it all year to year. It's a matter of personal preference. We're going to get back to the tax plan issue in just a minute, but the key thing here is to know that the money belongs to you. It goes in not subject to tax. It comes out not subject to tax to use it for qualified reasons.
Can you roll it over to another bank, to a different HSA account?
The question is, can you roll it to another bank? The short answer is yes. You can always take the money out of your HSA and put it into another HSA account if you choose. But it has to go into another HSA account. If you just transfer it into a general checking or savings account, it's going to be subject to tax.
Okay.
The board is going to maintain a banking relationship with United Bank, and that's for administrative purposes. Excuse me. You know, you can imagine if everybody starts making payroll deductions with the board's commitment to make its deposit, like it all go into place. If you were to retire or leave service of the board and you didn't want to use your United Bank account anymore, at that point you can certainly transfer it the same way you can roll a 401k or a 403b balance. Again, you want to make sure it goes from an HSA account to an HSA account so that you don't end up with the taxation. The short version is if you either use it for non-qualified expenses or you do something else that triggers a tax review of your program, the way it normally works is that the transaction is going to be subject to normal income tax and a 20% surcharge penalty if you're not at 65. So it's very important if you want to get full value from your plan that you make sure you're using it for qualified expenses and not getting into transactions that may not be appropriate.
Okay, let's see if I can get this right. My husband has a flexible savings account, which now we will only be able to use for dental and vision.
What they call a limited use account.
Okay, so, and there's a max on that, 2,500.
Well, the maximum is the same. The question is, what kind of flexible spending account can I use on the medical side if I want to be in the HSA? They do have something referred to as a limited use flexible spending account for medical reimbursement, and basically it covers dental and vision. That's most of what that's for. It has the same annual limit as a traditional flexible spending account, which I believe is $2,500 currently. It has a use it or lose it feature, so if you put money aside that and you don't use it, it's going back to the plan. We talk about use it or lose it. The example is I promised to put $1,500 into my flexible spending account. By the end of the year, I only have $1,200 in expenses. What happens to the other $300? It gets forwarded back to the plan. I lose that money because I didn't use it. That's the IRS's requirement for being able to do pre-tax transactions. For those of you using dependent care or thinking about using the dependent care reimbursement account, that's not affected by any of this. That stands on its own as a separate conversation. Still has a $5,000 maximum.
So if I use that, the 2,500, like you said, use it or lose it, so we will use that quickly with contact lenses and whatnot. But I can also contribute personally into the HSA.
Yes, as long as you're in a limited use FSA, you can also contribute to the HSA, and you can use the funds in the appropriate manner. The idea behind the limited use FSA is an IRS requirement because if you have both a medical HSA and a medical FSA, the way they originally would do it is is you had to use your HSA money first, which is really kind of backwards, because that's the one without the use or lose it feature, so it didn't make any sense. So they restructured and said, if you're going to be enrolled in an HSA, you may also be enrolled in a limited use FSA, and then the limited use FSA will primarily go for dental and vision expenses, and your HSA can go for medical. You can also still use it for dental and vision expenses if you blow through your FSA, which you might learn with a like example. But the specifics of that, you want to make sure you review with your accountant. Okay. This is a real quick flow chart from the Anthem side of things. How they look at this. What we try to do here with different colors is to break out the parts that you pay for or that the plans pay for. The preventive care box at the top, as we talked about, if you have wellness and or preventive services during the year, they're on the approved list, they're going to be paid 100% by the plan as long as you're in network, and they're not going to be charged against you or your deductible. So if the only expense I have next year is my annual well exam, the board's deposit stays in my account. Any money that I also put in is there at the end of the year. I get to start the new year with a balance plus the board's deposit. Under the terms of your bargaining agreement and standard contract, it doesn't matter how much you have in your account at the end of the year, you'll get your new deposit in year 2 and your new deposit in year 3. And again, the IRS doesn't have a limit about how much money you can have in the account, only how much you can put in each year. So if you are fortunate enough or you choose not to spend any of it because you're trying to save it for retirement or whatever, that's fine. And there's no correlation between new deposits and prior balance. Each year stands on its own as far as deposits and the IRS limit are concerned. You have money in your HSA bank. You can use that money to offset costs inside the deductible. So I had that office visit, I've got that prescription, and I haven't gotten my deductible yet. I can use the HSA funds to pay for it if I want, or I can just pay for it as I always have with a check or a credit card on the basis that I'm trying to save my HSA dollars for something else. It's your choice. You're under no obligation to use your HSA money except when you want to. A lot of people use it right away. It's a matter of personal preference, but you don't have to. It's important to understand that you control the timing and the use of the money in the HSA. When you're inside the annual deductible, that money is your responsibility to pay. Granted, the board's going to fund half the deductible for you, but technically the entire deductible is your responsibility. It's important to know that when you're paying for expenses inside the deductible, you're paying the negotiated rate between the insurance company and the provider. You're not paying retail. If you've gotten an explanation of benefits or an EOB form recently, say for an office visit, it'll say billed rate $150, approved rate $110, and then there'll be the other stuff like a copay and whatnot. That $110 is the negotiated approved fee amount between the provider and the carrier. And so if you have not fulfilled your deductible yet, the doctor's going to send you a bill for $110. Same is true with prescriptions in that you'll pay the negotiated amount for the script if you're inside the deductible. And so if the actual cost of the script is $32.28 and you've not met your deductible yet, you're going to get billed the negotiated $33.22 or whatever I just said. But that dollar value comes through. We're going to talk more in a minute about the specifics about how you use this program. But one thing I wanted to make sure everyone walks away from today and they're clear about is prescriptions are a real-time transaction when you're buying them with a high deductible. When you go to the pharmacy, they have a real-time link with the claim system. The person on the other side of the counter knows if you have or have not met your deductible. If you've not met your deductible, you're going to have to pay for the entire cost of the prescription to walk away with it. If you've already met your deductible, you're just going to pay the applicable copay. And that would be true for any family member covered under the program if you're enrolled in the $2,000, $4,000 plan. So again, while you're in the deductible, you're paying the negotiated fee amounts. Once you've reached the deductible, the plan will pay 100% of your in-network medical expenses for the balance of the year and 100% of the script costs less the applicable copay.
So you're saying it's a real-life transaction, so HSA is a savings account, right? So how
It's
does
a
that-
checking account.
It's a checking account, so if I have like an ATM card, I can use paper.
There will be a debit card and I believe a checkbook with the HSA account itself. If you choose to use it at the time that you're there, you can. Or, and we'll talk more about tax planning in a minute, but the way we used to do it, we would pay all of our expenses at the doctors and at the pharmacy with just our regular checkbook. And then once a quarter, my wife would write a check from our HSA account to our regular account for the amount that we spent during the 90 days. Because you're responsible for keeping your tax records. That was going to be one of the things later on. When you're using the program, need to be able to document that the money you took out of your HSA was for a qualified medical expense. So if the IRS audits your return, you need to be able to document the money you took out of the HSA, where it went, was it qualified or not. And some people do that every transaction. You're allowed to pay with regular after-tax dollars and then pay yourself back with your HSA funds if you'd like. I call it reimbursing yourself. That was the model my wife and I used because it was just 4 transactions during the year. We put everything together. They're actually still in a box in the safe in the basement. But there's different ways you can do that, but it's important to know that if you get asked, you have to be able to document money that came out of the HSA was used for qualified expense. As I said, we've got a 2-page handout today that talks a little bit about qualified expenses. It provides a link to the IRS publication 502, which gets into a lot more detail about that. If you've been involved with flexible spending accounts, basically the same definition. And in a few minutes, we'll talk more about the difference between a covered expense and a qualified expense. A qualified expense is much broader.
So when the board contributes their half of these 3 years, it will be going into the HSA?
Will go directly into your HSA account. And one of the things during open enrollment you'll hear, but I'll tell you now too, is that you have to actually open that account. You enroll in the high deductible plan, and once you do that, it triggers a process where you open your bank account. If you do not open your bank account, the board cannot make its deposit. So when you get the appropriate paperwork, please make sure you do it as promptly as possible. Also, it's important to know that you cannot use money in your HSA for services that occurred prior to the creation of the HSA. So this plan starts July 1st of 2016. Please don't submit your April or May expenses against it because that's not an allowable expense. You can only use the HSA for things that have happened on or after the date that you create your bank account. But that HSA account is going to be, again, in your name, and it's going to be a checking account. It will be labeled as an HSA checking account. Excuse me. And everybody has their own record-keeping preferences. But I strongly encourage you to keep those 2 things separate as you go forward. So please keep track of them. The $33.50, the question is, do those maximums include the board's deposit? The answer is yes, they do. The maximums from the IRS are all source maximums. So if it's the board's money, your money, and if you have anybody else you know that wants to put money in your HSA, you have to count that too. And I say that, we've had grandparents put money in the HSA accounts as part of estate planning.